The featured company is a paid client of Proactive Group Holdings, and this recording is disseminated by Proactive on its behalf.
The key to getting on to those projects is, the required variable is entirely political will. It's nothing else. Everything else we can manage. It is entirely down to political will. So, obviously, when we have a change of administration, such as we've just had in Colombia, then we're hopeful that we might see some of that political will. But let's see.
Hello, you're watching Proactive. I'm joined by Dr. Tim Coughlin. He is the CEO of Road Minerals. Tim, very good morning. With a new administration set to take office in Colombia, Royal Roads continue to build its Colombia portfolio through different political cycles. Does the election result change your level of confidence in the long-term opportunity, or does it simply reinforce the strategy you've already been pursuing?
Hi, Stephen. Good to see you again. Good question. Probably too early to say anything definitive and objective, but let's just say, with respect to the GAM project, which you and your viewers will know, we've been drilling for some time now. There's no change, despite what happens in Bogota. The key component to success on that project and almost any others in Colombia or elsewhere for that matter is the relationship with the community, and that's where we'll focus our efforts. On a broader scale, I don't think it would be too arguable to say that Colombia is highly prospective in respect of copper, and I'm saying that first because of the obvious demand, but then also gold. And us being, I think we are still the largest title holder in country, owning something like 1,840 square kilometers of combined titles and applications. Obviously, we would love to get onto that entire license package because it does contain several other porphyries, intrusion-related gold systems, all sorts of stuff that was curated by around about 20 years of work by the previous owner before we acquired that, and plus there's a bunch of titles that we own down near the Ecuador border in the Porphyry belt that we claimed way back in 2017. So we'd love to get onto those. Now, the key to getting on to those projects is, the required variable is entirely political will. It's nothing else. Everything else we can manage. It is entirely down to political will. So, obviously, when we have a change of administration, such as we've just had in Colombia, then we're hopeful that we might see some of that political will. But let's see.
GAM remains your most advanced project to date, but where else in the portfolio will the company's exploration be focused, Tim?
Oh, well, there's a couple of projects we've advanced already in what we call the Northern Block, so that's in Antioquia and Caldas. One of those, like I said, we'd like to get moving on that one. That looks more like a gold porphyry system. The El Molino system, which is down in the northern part of the Cauca province. Also, that's a spectacular project that a few years ago we flew mag geophysics over, and so we're fairly confident where we need to be on that. And then a handful of others down in Nariño. But I think those two, Merced and El Molino, would be our principal focus immediately.
Tim, with more than 1,840 square kilometers of exploration ground under control, how does Royal Road ensure it's focusing time and capital on the opportunities with the greatest potential to create shareholder value?
Well, that's a good question because, up until now, it's basically been enforced by practicality. Where can work? Where do we have meaningful community support? And where is safe for our employees? Now, if that changes, then it's a good problem to have, but it is a problem. I suppose the optionality there is that we either expand ourselves, we joint venture, we transact. One of the things I think I would like to explore is something that we we started working on a few years ago, which is the concept of very local joint ventures. So as opposed to to joint venturing or partnering up with international companies, actually helping establish local partnerships and then working with them on some of those prospects, which I think will, in some cases, alleviate some of the the perceived social tensions.
Well, Tim, I hope you'll continue to keep us updated on your progress. Thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure, Stephen. Thanks again.
Dr. Tim Coughlin, the CEO of Royal Road Minerals.
The featured company is a paid client of Proactive Group Holdings, and this recording is disseminated by Proactive on its behalf. It is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice, an offer, or a solicitation to buy or sell any securities. Viewers should conduct their own research and consult a qualified financial advisor before making investment decisions. The views expressed are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect those of Proactive Group Holdings, trading as Proactive Investors, or its affiliates. No responsibility is accepted for any loss arising from reliance on the information presented.